Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there lived a woodcutter and his wife. Their early days were lived in bliss in a small wood cottage with their two children, Hansel and Gretel. These two children grew up to be wise beyond their years. Hansel was smart, soft, and charming, where Gretel was poetic, cautious, but quick-witted. The two children loved to skip stones in the lake half a mile over. Hansel and Gretel spent most of their time finding the perfect, flattest skipping stones. Their collection of stones was large, as they spent more time collecting than actually skipping the rocks. Over time, they had acquired a strange companion, a bird, who would steal their stones and hide them in various places all over the land, though Hansel and Gretel knew not why. At the peak of their childhood, a great famine struck the country where Hansel and Gretel lived. It left the rich secluded from the middling and poor classes. The merchant class fought to survive, and the poorest of the poor plummeted into utter starvation. The woodcutter and his wife, along with Hansel and Gretel, eventually struggled to stay fed.
Little did the woodcutter and his wife know, Hansel and Gretel had been listening to their whole conversation.
Our mother does not want us anymore.
Shh, Gretel, father will not allow her to get rid of us.
Oh, but what will father do once we are left alone with our mother?
I think it true.
Now, Hansel was very smart. His plans of action were always calculated and efficient. The next day, before they were ordered to start on the household chores, Hansel ran half a mile down to the lake. He gathered dozens of skipping stones. When he returned home, Hansel could see that his mother and sister were packing up for what looked like a normal journey into the woods. Though Hansel knew that this time their mother had different plans for them. He held his sack of skipping stones tight as he approached his mother.
Times are tough, my dear children. We must venture into the forest to help your father with his work.
But Mom...
Stop! No more excuses!
And so, Hansel, Gretel, and their mom journeyed into the thick wood forest. It was as eerie as thick fog on a stormy night. The sky was a dark gray and the trees were black and gloomy. Luckily, Hansel had remembered to drop the shimmering stones on the ground every few feet, so that they could follow them back on their return home.
The children stayed seated, reluctantly. They waited and waited and waited, but their mother never returned for them.
What if we are attacked or eaten? What about wolves, bears, cougars, raccoons? Gretel, oh Gretel, what are we to do?
I will fill it out.
Hansel and Gretel finally arrived back home at the break of dawn. However, they were so tired that both immediately fell asleep right in front of their cottage door. They awoke, tucked in their beds, to sound of the woodcutter and his wife arguing. How could you leave our beloved children in the forest all alone?
We will all starve if they stay here. There are too many mouse and not enough food. It is the only way, the only way.
Now Hansel and Gretel surely knew their luck was over. Hansel tried to think of a way to get the two of them out of this mess. He looked all over in search of their skipping rocks, since they were nowhere to be found. Hansel figured the mischievous bird had stolen them all. Hopeless, Hansel and Gretel went back to their beds and waited for their mother to come and take them to the forest. Sure enough, the woodcutter's wife made her way up to their room to retrieve them. She ordered Hansel into his walking boots and Gretel into her washing clothes. Off they went once more. Before they left, however, the woodcutter secretly slipped Hansel a small loaf of bread. Hansel saw the look of despair on his dear father's face. Hansel slipped the bread in his pocket, crushing it into mostly crumbs and subtly followed behind his mother and beloved sisters. Every few feet he dropped these breadcrumbs on the ground. Soon their mother grew suspicious of Hansel.
Hansel, what is it that you think you are up to?
Gretel, hearing this, quickly came up with a way to distract their mother.
Mother, mother, a wild forest fairy just flew into your hair.
Panicked, Hansel and Gretel's mother began to shake and squirm. She disheveled her hair and shed. Off they went once more. Before they left, however, the woodcutter secretly slipped Hansel a small loaf of bread. Hansel saw the look of despair on his dear father's face. Hansel slipped the bread in his pocket, crushing it into mostly crumbs, and sadly followed behind his mother and beloved sisters. Every few feet he dropped these breadcrumbs on the ground. Soon their mother grew suspicious of Hansel.
Hansel, what is it that you think you are up to?
Gretel, hearing this, quickly came up with a way to distract their mother.
Mother, mother, a wild forest fairy just flew into your hair.
Panicked, Hansel and Gretel's mother began to shake and squirm. She disheveled her hair and screamed with fear. This gave Hansel time to catch up.
You children will be the death of me. Hurry, along now.
They traveled for a few more miles until they came to a very small clearing, even smaller than the previous.
I'm going to find a good place to chop wood. Both of you, stay put. I will come back for you shortly.
Hansel offered Gretel what little bread was left.
This is not what you have been dropping on the ground.
I dropped most of our skipping stone last time. Mother, let us down a different road today, and that stupid bird must stolen all of the stone. The breadcrumbs will be here in the morning, and we can follow them on our return home.
In the morning? Hansel, I will not stay here overnight. What about wolves? What about...
Okay, no wolves, bears, cougars, raccoons, muscats, or squirrels will get us. Let's just promise we will get out of here.
They promised each other and then relaxed in the very small glade, resting their feet and playing guessing games. Suddenly, their nose was filled with an oddly sweet aroma. The children followed the wonderful scent. It grew stronger and more delicious. Mouth dripping with drool, Hansel and Gretel finally reached it. In front of their eyes and nose sat a house made entirely out of the most delicious looking sweets. The roof was coated with fluffy white icing, pink, sticky syrup, drizzled and dripping along the side of the dark chocolate exterior. A gumdrop door frame was sopping with sparkling icing sugar. A frothing milk chocolate river flowed under a gingerbread bridge that led to a gingerbread door, and a lollipop garden sat in front of a large crystallized sugar window. Hansel and Gretel stood stunned for a moment, and then without caution or hesitation they ran to the house and began stuffing their faces full of candy.
What little pretties have come to my house today?
Hansel and Gretel stopped short and stared at one another. Each was messy and covered in candy.
Ugh. Oh, two little ones to enjoy.
The old woman then invited Hansel and Gretel into her house.
There's more candy in here. Fresh candy, my sweets.
Hansel immediately ran into the candy house despite Gretel's caution protest. After a while of standing outside, the old woman popped her jack-toothed head out from the little house and beckoned Gretel.
Come in, come in. My, you are very pretty.
With this alongside her idea of Hansel stuffing his face in the interior of the house, Gretel eventually followed inside. When Gretel entered the house, she immediately heard the gingerbread door shut heavily behind her. She turned around and noticed that the entire inside of the candy house was made of solid steel. Inside the house were bags and bags of brilliant gold coins. Gretel whispered her head back around to see that Hansel was locked up. With this, alongside her idea of Hansel stuffing his face in the interior of the house, Gretel eventually followed inside. When Gretel entered the house, she immediately heard the gingerbread door shut heavily behind her. She turned around and noticed that the entire inside of the candy house was made of solid steel. Inside the house were bags and bags of brilliant gold coins. Gretel whipped her head back around to see that Hansel was locked up in a cage, hanging directly over top of a boiling pot of water. This woman was no woman at all. She was an evil witch.
Now, go sit at the table, little pretty. Help me slice up those chops. We are going to fatten him up.
Now Gretel understood the evil witch's plan. She had used her candy house to lure them inside so that she could eat them up for dinner. Gretel thought all hope was lost as she sat at a large metal table slicing meat. She sopped and sliced, she sliced and sopped. Gretel filled 3 large buckets full with the fatty food for the old woman to cook in her large boiling pot. Poor Hansel sat anxiously, thinking of a way to escape. He watched as Gretel threw the scraps and bones into a separated pile beside the bucket of sliced meat. Suddenly, Hansel was struck with a brilliant idea. He started to cough violently in an attempt to attract Gretel's attention.
Oh, quit your hacking. You best not be sick if I'm going to snack on you.
The evil witch shrieked. All the commotion caused Gretel to look up in Hansel's direction. He motioned her to distract the evil witch, seeing her poor brother's desperation. Gretel scoured her brain for a way to distract the evil witch. After a moment of thought, Gretel cried and dropped her knife.
Oh my!
What do you think you're doing? Get back to work!
I think I saw a dragon outside.
A dragon, you say?
Oh goodness, that was most definitely a dragon I saw. It will surely burn down the forest with its fiery breath, and then your candy house will be revealed to all the grown-ups in the land. How will you ever catch children if your candy house is not secret to the grown-ups, who can no longer smell the sweetness of the candy?
With this, the evil witch unlocked the steel and gingerbread door and ran outside in search of the supposed dragon. Hansel quickly motioned Gretel to hand him one of the bones lying in the scrap pile. Gretel held up a large bone, but Hansel shook his head. She held up a thick bone, but Hansel shook his head. And then, from the bottom of the pile, Gretel found the thickness of all and brought it over to Hansel's cage, for she knew what he would be using it for. He told her his plan just in time for them to hear the evil witch hustling back. Just as Gretel sat down at the large metal table, the evil witch stormed in the house looking puzzled.
Chop larger. The larger the better, little pretty.
As the evil witch focused on Gretel's slicing, Hansel quietly maneuvered the thin bone around in the keyhole of his cage.
Clink, click, ding.
Slowly and quietly, Hansel removed the bone and waited patiently for his plan to unfold. Once Gretel had finished her slicing, the evil witch walked in to the pot located directly underneath Hansel.
Well, what are you waiting for, little Billy? Help me get this food in the pot.
That pot doesn't look quite hot enough.
I will dip your little feet in and we can check.
How can you trust that I will say it is hot enough? I will surely lie, and then the food will never be cooked for my brother to eat.
The evil witch furrowed her brow and looked for the pot to Gretel and back again. Oh, I suppose you're right. Stay there. I will check to see if the water is almost at a boil. The evil witch huffed. Gretel remained behind as the evil witch approached the pot. Gretel waited for Hansel's signal. Just as the evil, selfish witch brought the tip of her long, crooked nose to the boiling water, Hansel kicked his cage door open. This gave Gretel the signal to push the evil witch into the boiling pot of water. The evil witch topped over into the pot just in time for Hansel to land right on her head. Avoiding the hot water beneath his feet, the heat from the water melted the old witch into sweet, gooey syrup. The children ran out of the house once they had gathered the sacks of gold that the evil witch had stolen over the years from the other child that came by her candy house, and the sweets that the witch has left. Hansel and Gretel followed the path from the witch. They first smelled the candy until they reached the very small glade where Hansel had last dropped bread crumbs. However, the children found that their breadcrumbs had been eaten and replaced by their favorite skipping stones by none other than the rascal bird that had stolen them. They chirped happily as it finished its last breadcrumbs. Apparently, the bird had been hungry too. Hansel and Gretel gathered their skipping stones in the bags of gold and made their way home.
When they arrived, they ran into the embrace of their father, who had become a widowed man after their mother had, ironically, died from food poisoning. Their father welcomed them home and apologized for letting their mother's selfishness overcome him. After that, they gave all the sweets to all the people in the country, which made them the heroes in the country. The two siblings lived in happiness together for the rest of their days, sharing their newfound wealth with the land and, of course, skipping stones in the lake half a mile over while feeding their naughty breadcrumbs. The end.